Alright, you've served your purpose. Get out of here. Welcome back, everybody. So today I'm reviewing Pokemon Legends Arceus. This is a remarkable game that caught me by surprise because I went into it with relatively low expectations. I was not expecting very much because when I saw that trailer years ago, or 2 years ago, whatever it was, the graphics were abysmal. And I hate to say it because I'm not a graphics snob, but Game Freak, with all of the means at their disposal, primarily financial, they should be putting out much higher quality products in the visual department at least. And then what we got in this trailer, even though the concepts look really interesting and they're going back to Sinnoh and it's ancient times, it's kind of the origins of people and Pokemon learning to cooperate and live together, you just couldn't help but focus on all of these visual imperfections. They're worse than imperfections. It makes it sound like they were close to being perfect, but no, the game looked terrible. And, you know, when the game came out, I wasn't one of the first buyers. I thought they don't necessarily deserve my support, or I'll at least wait to hear what other people have to say. And I'm looking at the sales here, and you know, it's actually a really high-selling game. It's 14th overall on the Switch for units sold. Pokemon Sword and Shield, 25, almost 26 million units sold. Remarkable. Scarlet and Violet, at the time of making this video, 22.5 million. And then here's Legends Arceus, almost 15 million. So, commercially, it did really well. But how did it do critically? According to my friends, it was decent, it was fine. Some of them thought it was really good, but I never heard much more than that. I heard a little bit of people talking about the battling and, oh yeah, this is good, like it's cool, you go agility, you go strength. What does that all mean? I'm going to get into all of that, and I'm going to be talking about the different components of this game as I walk you through my experience with it. So that was what happened before the game released, and I'll take you into my first impressions on day one with the game, and then how it eventually completely won me over, and why everybody should give this game a chance, especially if you overlooked it, and especially if you're the type of person whose favorite thing in the Pokemon games is the catching. Remember when the first games came out, and I think even the first season of the show, gotta catch 'em all? That was the tagline. Well, that went away at some point, but it's back in full force for Legends Arceus. So, it's night one, and I boot up the game, and I'm just struck by the low quality, the low effort of the presentation. This is something that I'm aware of, and game developers are aware of this too. I've mentioned the example before of, I think it was Fallout 3. There's the big presentation, and when you're finally going to see the open world, you get out of the vault, and there's this expanse in front of you, and it just does everything to draw you in and to make you want to explore. And there's a little bit of that here. But again, you're also struck by these lower quality graphics. Again, I'm not trying to be a graphics snob, but it is jarring, and all it was doing was confirming my expectations and confirming what I saw before. But I start to play, and it's charming, it's whimsical, you get to meet your starter Pokemon, and all of a sudden it starts to build up and build up and build up, and little things about the game start to grow on you. Well, then you get into the first town, and I can't help but notice that all of the houses are copy-pasted. Okay, that's whatever. We'll live with that. The rest of the town looks pretty interesting, and it looks pretty large at least, so we'll explore that. I go into the options, and I start tweaking my settings, and I try to tweak my camera speed, because it's a little bit too low on the default setting. So I just turn the setting up 1, which happens to be the maximum, and all of a sudden my camera's flying around everywhere, and I've got no control over it. I'm thinking, what is this? Did people not quality control this game? Did they not test this and see that between settings 3 and 4, you have something that is just way too slow, and then something that is whipping around way too quickly? Where's the happy medium in between? Whatever. These were just little nitpicks, but these are what I'm faced with in my first night of playing the game. Finally, I get out into the open world, and it's time to do a little bit of catching. In this game, for those of you who don't know, your primary task is to complete the first ever Pokédex. Perfect. It's a good enough setting, it's a good enough premise for this game. You don't need much more than that in a Pokemon game. And really, all that does is invigorate you for an adventure. So one of the primary goals is to simply catch every Pokemon and to register it in your Pokédex. But you could take it a step further and complete the Pokédex page for that particular Pokemon if you catch it X number of times, or if you battle it and use certain moves on it, or if it uses certain moves against you. Or maybe you can catch it and then you can use those moves in battle with it. What happens is, as you complete these little checks, these little tasks, you start to get points, and when you have 10 points, that is a completed Pokédex entry. So for Pokemon like Bidoof, yeah, I used it in battle a little bit, but I could have gone out there and I could have just caught 30 of them, and that probably would have completed the Pokédex page, or maybe not. But you get the idea. There's a lot of variability, there's a lot of different ways that you can play the game and experience completing the Pokédex, which again, even though the goal is complete the Pokédex, gotta catch them all, the fact that the game still presents you with other ways of doing that is so refreshing. Now, before I go on detailing the rest of my adventure, let me focus on just a few more mechanics. So with catching, the only other thing I can mention is you can throw out some bait, some food, that might entice the Pokemon to go eat it, and then when it turns its back to you, perfect, there's a free shot to try to catch it. If you choose to throw a Pokemon, not an empty Pokeball, then you'll engage it in battle. And if you successfully caught it unaware, then you get a free turn. This kind of innovation, this mechanic, I would love to see this in future Pokemon games. I don't know if it exists, I haven't played Scarlet yet, but I will after this game. Now, how about the rest of the battling? There's an initiative system. So you actually see a turn order in the top right part of your screen. And for the most part, depending on your speed, Pokemon are going to go one, and then the other, and then one, and then the other. There are strong and agile moves. So as you use your basic moves, or as your Pokemon levels up, eventually it will unlock the potential to use a strong or an agile variation of that move. When it's strong, more damage, more accurate, however, it reduces your initiative. So if you don't kill a Pokemon with a strong, or knock it out, with a strong style move, then that opposing Pokemon might get 2 turns in a row, and maybe that's enough for it to knock you out. If I use an agile style move, I'll do reduced damage. In some cases, I'll even have reduced accuracy, but I will increase my initiative. So if I combine that with a quick attack, I might get to take 2 turns in a row. Then I have a really easy battle on my hands. So that's cool. I don't need to see that in future games, but it's a really nice thing to play around with here. Again, battling is not my favorite thing about this game. Trainer battles are not necessarily the most exciting, but let me tell you one other really good thing here about Arceus. The gameplay is fast and really fluid. So when you get into a battle, you don't have the cutscene. You don't have the transition with the different music blaring and the screen fading and all of this and that. No, it's just boom, Pokemon, camera swivels, you're in battle. When you finish up the battle, you can actually start moving before the Pokemon's even fainted. So again, just really fast, really flowing. I feel like that's something to remark on, because at some point while I was playing, I just thought, man, I've caught so many Pokemon, I've engaged in so many battles, and it feels like I'm just progressing so much faster than I did in previous titles. And that's true. That's exactly why. That is how catching and battling work. Now let me continue with the rest of my adventure. I'm going forward a little bit, and there's some Starly. If I try to approach the Starly normally, they run away from me. They're small, they're weak creatures, they're timid, they see this human coming, they want to get out of there. So for Starly, you gotta crouch low, you gotta use the grass, and that's where the stealth element comes in. Now the stealth element is not perfect, it's not completely refined, but it's there, and it's usable, and in future games, if they choose to have these same gameplay mechanics, then they can definitely clean it up a bit, but it does the job. And as you continue going, you see these different things in the environment. You see these trees that are a little bit different. They've got some fruit hanging in them. How you engage with different objects and doodads on the environment, you throw one of your party Pokemon out that, and the party Pokemon interacts with it, breaks the gems, knocks the tree, whatever it is. It's like Headbutt, right? You get to see a visual representation of the Headbutt move. So, apricot trees, you get these apricot berries. You go and you see these gems, these mineral deposits, you get an ore or a gemstone, that's another crafting material. Take those 2 things, you can craft Pokeballs. A lot of the items in the game you can get for free if you simply spend some time going around the map and collecting these resources, and then for the recipes themselves, you'll unlock them as you play the game, you have to buy them, etc. Important that I explain all of these different components in the game as I lead up to the next mechanic. So I continue exploring. There's the flat field, and there's the Ponyta roaming. There's some more Bidoof over there. Oh, what's that? There's actually an Eevee. Eevee's really skittish. It also runs away when it sees you. Cool. Follow the river. There's some Buizel. I follow the mountains into this area surrounded by the mountains, and at the base of it is a flower field. And during the day, there's Wurmple, there's Silcoon, there's Beautifly. If you happen to go to that same area at night, the Silcoons are replaced by Cascoons, and the Cascoons are replaced by Dustox. Not one for one, mind you. There is some randomness and there's some variability to what Pokemon appear. So my first pass in that area, I saw a Pichu, and unfortunately I didn't catch it. When I went back after resting up, there was no Pichu. Ah, okay. So there are some rare Pokemon in this game that don't always emerge. I'm going to have to come back here a few times. I'm going to have to hopefully see it when I do. Let me quickly revisit some of the older games here. In Red, Blue, and Yellow, you had a patch of grass to your right, a patch of grass to your left. You didn't necessarily know, unless you spent ample time in both, that this one only has Pidgey and Rattata, and this one on the left has Nidoran. Maybe as you continue your adventure and you get into some battles, a trainer throws Nidoran at you, you check the Pokedex entry, and you see, oh, its habitat is actually back there. I should go back and get it. You know, when we were kids, we had so much time for backtracking and for just trying to find everything with ample hours spent in the game. When I replayed Ultra Sun not too long ago, actually just before playing this game, I was so struck by how many Pokemon were in every patch of grass, and I had no way of knowing how many there were unless I opened up a resource on the computer and I was following along a guide to make sure I caught every Pokemon. That is purely circumstantial, and that is purely my issue. I'm a completionist. I want to have every Pokemon on the first pass if I can get it, and I don't want to have to battle 20 different random Pokemon to see that there are 8 different species. Maybe I need to actually engage in 30 battles to see that there are 9 species or 10 species. It can be really time consuming. That's exactly what it was. In this game, the reason why, well, there's a few reasons why it's not going to be so time consuming or it's not going to feel like an arduous labor. First of all, there's the fact that all these Pokemon are presented to you on the open world. So you can tell at a glance what species are there and what you want to engage with. You can choose to do that, or you can choose to ignore them. You don't have to go into the tall grass every time and try to get 5 instances of battles. Now, the other thing, like I mentioned with those resources, you are incentivized, if you want to save your money, to revisit those areas and collect those resources. So you're going to be doing 1 pass, a 2nd pass, you're going to be resting up. What are the benefits of the day and night cycle? Is that as you do your different passes at different times of day, you'll be engaging different Pokemon. You'll be seeing different species that way. And of course, maybe you do that 2 or 3 times, and that's when you see Eevee. That's when you see Pichu or Pikachu. So it is so organic, and it's not something that you feel like you have to dedicate too much of your extra time to. You will see, I think, most, if not every rare Pokemon simply by going through every area a couple of times naturally. I love the feeling of this game. Catching feels like what it should have been for a long time, but hey, I'm not going to complain that the innovation has come late. I'm happy that we have the innovation in this game at least. And so for those of you who have always loved filling out the Pokédex, for those of you who got a little bit frustrated with how tedious it became in the later entries, you got to try this game. You're going to enjoy those aspects so much, I promise you. Of course, part of the incentive and part of the excitement is that as you go to these different areas, you're going to be seeing new species of Pokemon. Okay, now I'm in a mountain pass. Now they're a Geodude. Oh, what's this? One of the ore deposits is actually shaking on the field. A Geodude pops out. In a later area where the Pokemon are higher level, it's a Graveler, etc. There are so many different ways that you're going to be engaging and seeing these Pokemon in their ecosystems. It is not a complex system, and this is where sequels have a lot of room to improve or a lot of room where they could add new things. For example, maybe in a future game, hopefully they make more of these Legends games. Hopefully we'll see a couple of wild Pokemon engaging in the wild. And Game Freak doesn't have to tease us. They don't have to make us feel any anguish as there's like a rare Pokemon engaging a common Pokemon and the rare Pokemon faints before you could get to it. No, just make common Pokemon battle each other in the field or something like that. In other parts of the game, when you get to the water, there are Mantine and Mantike, and they are swimming around together. Well, maybe they could do a little bit more than that, and maybe we can see some sort of coexistence between Mantine and Tentacool, or whatever Pokemon would actually make sense, right? I'm looking forward to where they can go from here. The foundation is set. It is a really solid foundation. It is a really fun game to play with a lot of exciting and interesting mechanics. The potential is there, though, for it to become a 10 out of 10 game, like how Zelda did with Tears of the Kingdom. I'm hoping to see that kind of progress in this Legends series. So, my time playing the game was really enjoyable, and there are a lot of memorable moments from the game, and there are a lot of areas that your first time through them are going to be exciting for one reason, and your second time through them are going to be exciting. Maybe you take a different route. This game is actually quite big. There's a lot of land to explore here. So you're going to be zigzagging a little bit. There are going to be other ways of traversing that become available to you. And let me say, one thing that was really jarring and just, it seemed like such a terrible thing to slip through the quality control. Your character, when you get onto any kind of a slope, feels like they're walking through molasses. And you will slip and you will slow down. And even when you jump down from a small little ledge, your character has a weird floating animation. For a long time, you're going to be wondering, why is it like this? Later on, you're going to see that there are actually mechanics that are tied into that. I'm going to say they weren't executed perfectly well because they are so off-putting when you encounter them early on in the game, but they have their purposes. So again, just more things that Game Freak can clean up as they hopefully make more games in this series. So many things were done well, though. The characters, I thought, were some of the best characters in any Pokemon game, both for design purposes and also just better personalities. Maybe it helps that you're seeing them in 3D. The music is pretty phenomenal from start to finish. I listened to the soundtrack while I was working, and it was probably one of the most enjoyable Pokemon soundtracks that I've heard, maybe number one even. I mean, Gen 4 gives you great music to work with, and a lot of the renditions are just made even better. There are these other mechanics in the game that make catching even more exciting. So maybe when the game does start to get a little bit stale, it's like, okay, well, I've seen Graveler, I've seen Geodude, I've seen Zubat and Ghastly. I'm starting to see these Pokemon a little bit too often. And yes, now they're available with higher levels, but that's not necessarily doing it for me. Well, how about some Alpha Pokemon? Alpha Pokemon are the big alpha versions of their particular species, and they're angry, they're enraged. You can't approach them you can approach them a normal way. You can actually try to catch them, but they are going to be higher level. They do have lower catch chances, and if you mess up and they notice you, then they will engage you in battle. Thankfully, you can run away at any point. Sure, it might knock out one of your Pokemon in your party, but at least you can run away and there's no chance that you fail to run away. So that's been cleaned up in this game as well. I appreciate that too. The Alpha Pokemon are cool. And then there are mass outbreaks, which you've experienced in some of the more recent games. Actually, I think as far back as Gold, Silver, Crystal, there were mass outbreaks of some sort. Mass outbreaks are here. They add more variety. There's a chance of encountering shiny Pokemon, which I have caught a few legitimately in this game. And then there's some other things related to the story, which I don't touch on in this review, but I will say again, they always add another level of freshness. They always introduce a new way of playing the game or a new way of experiencing the game that at least freshens it up for that particular instance. I tend not to focus on stories in games because they're all relatively weak and my expectations and the bar is set pretty low. But this one has a concise story. This one is neat, it gets the job done, it moves you through from A to B to C, and like I said, the characters in this game are enjoyable, so they are more of a highlight than the story itself. And the main goal of the game with filling out the Pokédex, with that always at the forefront, you don't need that much else as far as storytelling goes. So that is Pokemon Legends Arceus and most of its mechanics explained. That is my first foray into the game, my first experiences, my first impressions, and how I enjoyed the game more and more as I continued to play it. I beat the game in 44 hours, and even though some aspects of the game started to grow a little bit tiresome, I felt like the game's pace and the game's duration were perfect. I chose to spend more time going back and catching more Pokemon. I chose to spend a lot of time doing something therapeutic, which was organizing my boxes, or pastures as they're called in this game, since you don't have the box technology. And post-game, I actually ended up spending another 20 hours playing the game. I'm still not 100% wrapped up with it now, but I will probably do that as I have the rest of the weekend available to me, and I'll try to beat this game 100% before I retire it. Just so much fun, so enjoyable, so much there for you. Again, I will emphasize, just so that nobody's unclear about anything, the people who will get the most out of this game, who will enjoy it as much as I did, are the people who love catching Pokemon. This is probably one of my favorite games in recent memory. No, certainly one of my favorite games in recent memory. Maybe one of my favorite games of all time. Is it one of my best games of all time? No, there's a lot of room for improvement. There are a lot of ways that they could still take one element of the game, go from a 3 out of 5 or 4 out of 5, and turn it into a 5 out of 5 quality. But what is here was so much fun. I liked seeing the Pokemon again. I liked seeing the Pokemon with their different forms. The animations are great. The moves look good. The Pokemon look great. Sure, the environments are a little low quality in a lot of areas, but all of that is okay because the game is fun. The gameplay is something that I personally really enjoy doing, and that is why this is one of my favorite games. So, hopefully, as I play Scarlet, I'm going to be seeing a lot of the improvements that were made in this game applied to their mainline series. I don't know yet. Once I beat that game, I'm going to be ranking all of the mainline Pokemon games, and I'm sure Arceus is going to come up in that video, even though it is a spin-off. And that's about it. Hopefully you all enjoyed this video. A little bit foggy in my head over here. I know I don't sound great, so hopefully it was all bearable and it all made sense. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Let me know, did you enjoy Pokemon Legends Arceus? And did my review do enough to convince you that this game is worth playing? Did my review hopefully convince you that maybe some of the things that you heard about the game were not accurate representations of what you can expect? Again, play this game if you love catching Pokemon. All right, that's it. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.